Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Scorpio and Pisces rising. So the sun is the aspirational self. It's who you want to become, and it can be central to the influence in your chart. But the rising sign can be your physical appearance, how you behave when you are in social settings. And in my opinion, it is very influential until the first Saturn return around the age of 30. So it can be how people really see you, but it's actually just the first impression. And as you get older, you may gravitate more and more towards the sun. Even how you dress, even how you behave, I feel is going to be more like a Scorpio and less like a Pisces. But let's talk about the Pisces influence because it can affect the way you look. By the way, the rising sign determines the ruler. The ruler of the rising sign is your ruler. So your ruler is Neptune. And because your ruler is Neptune, there's always this rather indistinct quality of somebody with Pisces rising. There can be a lost quality, meaning that the person seems otherworldly but ungrounded. When I say lost, I can mean, it's not to say that the person is completely clueless, but they may have this ungrounded quality because they're tuning in to life at a higher level. And with the sun in Scorpio, you have like this double water influence, and the water represents the emotions. But Pisces in particular, I was going to say the water is also programmable. They've done studies that shows that you can program water. There was a book about that with this doctor. I think he was Japanese. And he was able to structure water using, I think, showing the difference between positive words spoken to water versus negative, and how it changed things. And so there's that mutable quality, and actually, or malleable. Pisces is a mutable sign. And so Pisces, as a mutable water sign, is very influenced by the environment around them. And again, I think that this is going to be more the case when you are on the younger side. As you get older, you start to come into your own. So you might even be a bit of a late bloomer, as far as I can tell, where you may have to go through a lot of trial and error to get to the point where you realize that you have to have boundaries, because Neptune is about dissolving. And I was going to say Saturn is about structure, but Scorpio isn't ruled by Saturn. Scorpio is ruled by Mars and Pluto, and you can also say that those are your rulers because they rule the sun sign. And they're considered malefic planets, meaning that they exert a rather challenging influence. And I don't like those terms like malefic, because it just sounds like bad and good, which is pretty simplistic. Obviously, we could say a planet like Jupiter or Venus makes life easier, but sometimes there's excess, sometimes there's self-indulgence. What's that saying about the diamond getting created under pressure or something like that? There's a lot of truth to that. And by the way, I do believe that this combination can really have come from a fair amount of trauma. And I believe that every sign is capable of having that reality, but the water signs can really be affected by it because they are so sensitive. So in other words, if your sun sign is an air sign, you might be detached enough to kind of not take things to heart when, even if they happen to you personally, even if you're like a young child. By the way, look at your moon sign, because this is going to be particularly important for this double water, sun and ascendant. The moon sign is the emotional nature, and that can tip the balance. If your moon sign is in air or even earth, so with the air signs, we're talking about Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, the earth, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, there could be a lot more detachment, a lot more groundedness for the earth in particular. And that can lead to kind of like not being emotionally overwrought, like kind of keeping it in check. And I honestly believe, maybe because I have the moon in an earth sign in Virgo, that some people are self-indulgent with their emotions and they like to wallow in emotions. Maybe that's just my personal slant. But the reason I say that is because when somebody has a lot of water, or maybe they have a lot of fire and they have a lot more passion, not exactly the same thing as that personal emotional makeup, but can show up similarly, the person may, it's almost like indulging in materialism for an earth sign. The person may really feel that emotions should be felt to the nth degree, and sometimes even they can create drama in their lives to kind of live through their emotions. Because really, on the flip side, people who are highly emotional might feel very uncomfortable in situations that are pretty chill, and are everything is going as planned, and the other person is behaving in a very balanced manner. This is, again, I think, like the trauma response, where a person who has been through a lot of trauma doesn't feel comfortable when everything is calm. They may not trust a person who is on an even keel, because they feel that they might see that person as boring. That certainly could happen. And yes, it is a dysfunctional behavior or attitude, but it's coming from, it's there for a reason. It happened for a reason. It happens for a reason. And when the person is made aware of it, I think that they can, kind of like see it coming before it happens. Because like if you're looking for a healthy relationship and you've been through some quite negative ones in the past, and you meet someone and they're not an addict, and they don't fly off the handle. They tend to be very rational. When they're upset, they let you know, and they just state how they're feeling. You might think that that person is, you might not even be attracted to such a person, because your family of origin, you may have been raised by people who were always in some kind of emotional crisis, and that they normalize that for you, and anything that is normal is seen as undesirable. So these are the kind of things that you would have to look out for, and this can affect all areas of life. So going back to the rising sign, A, a person who's born under this ascendant may have very dreamy eyes, or the aura itself. There's like a glamour. Neptune rules photography. And you may be one of those people that, even if you are not physically attractive to the degree that we would, you would stop traffic, when you take a picture, there you might be like, I wouldn't say completely different, but be transformed through the, I won't call it an illusion of photography, but the lens, the filter, whatever, not a literal filter how they have nowadays, but that whatever you want to call that bridge between film and the reality of the person. I do think photography can be magic in a sense, but some people are photogenic and some people aren't. And some people are just they're transformed by photography. And I think Neptune ascendants would be high on that list. And another thing connected to that is kind of the little boy or little girl, this helpless quality that as adults you may display. And all these things can be indefinable, that it's not necessarily one particular physical trait. It might just be the aura, but it can be very appealing to others because they may feel protective of you. Even if you're like 50 years old, you may have people who are like that. And you may have trouble with your image, meaning that I feel like, again, talking about the physical characteristics, that the person may look different from day to day. And that just kind of underscores this quality of Neptune, this illusion, this chameleon effect. But I also believe that people who are born under the, who are born with Neptune rising can be confused about how they project themselves. They don't really know. It's hard to get a handle on who they are. Again, I feel that as you get older, you start to solidify that, and there's also a positive aspect to this, because people who identify with their profession or some other quality can really be limited in their scope. If you don't identify with anything in particular, you're just kind of open to being influenced, and in a way, it's like being open-minded as far as I'm concerned, because you're not just rejecting certain aspects, and you're just kind of like a blank slate, sometimes you could call it. But like I said earlier, that can open you up to negative influences, and sometimes as a child and teenager, that may have been an issue for you, where you gravitated towards the kids that were problematic. And this, not to say that, with other influences supporting it, anybody with a prominent Pisces can find themselves attracted to troubled people in relationships too. But I wouldn't necessarily say that just simply with Pisces rising. But one thing that you have to really fight against is seeing yourself as a victim or identifying as a victim, even if you actually were one. It's not to just completely gloss over those kinds of things, which are horrible. It's to realize that even if bad things happen, we don't have to build an identity around it, because then we just prolong those negative effects and we don't transcend those issues. And that's the whole point. With the sun in Scorpio, there is like this ferocity that I see. Scorpio is a fixed water sign. Scorpio people tend to struggle with forgiveness, and I think that's the main reason why, because they're dealing with a fixed modality, and that makes them hold on to grievances. And, being a water sign too, their emotions can get they can get into that rut with their emotions. And, it makes it harder to just kind of let go of that. And I also think that there is this sense of vengeance with the sign of Scorpio. And that will be enhanced if you have Mars in Libra, or even Mars in Scorpio, but Libra is about fairness. And so that combination can lead to somebody who will feel like if the person that did them wrong, or the people who did them wrong, if it was more than one, are just going, on their merry way, and they're not paying the price for whatever it is that they did, that it's not fair. And other signs besides Libra might say, oh, well, it's not fair. Oh, well, and move on. But Libra is, you could almost say, obsessed with fairness. So the point being that a more evolved Scorpio person can understand the concept of forgiveness in its truest meaning or intention, which is simply, I feel that we understand that hurt people hurt people. And a lot of people go crazy when you say something like, when you even try to understand why people do bad things. They're like, oh, you're taking the side of the murderer or the rapist or the this or the that. And it has nothing to do with that. It's not about taking sides. It's about understanding that things don't just randomly happen. People do what they do. When people do such heinous acts, there's definitely a reason, and it's usually that person has been abused as well. And it doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it does explain it. So when a person has been harmed by someone and they feel like that, there's no accountability from that person, maybe that person never apologized, or if that person, well, I'll just say in the case where the person hasn't apologized and they haven't felt any repercussions for what they've done, it can really feel like they're getting away with it. And but even if somebody does apologize for what they've done, it doesn't mean that the person who was harmed is going to just forgive them. Unfortunately, some people believe that not forgiving someone is a way of being powerful. Like if you can hate someone for what they've done, that you're like really doing something good. And it really kind of like energetically holds us to that other person, as far as I'm concerned. When we have like a very strong feeling about somebody else's behavior, it can be, it can really like keep a person trapped in the past. It's hard to talk about because I know that there are some situations that seem like it would be impossible to ever forgive that person. I get it. Some that are particularly heinous. But the thing is that if the person doesn't forgive, meaning that it's not that they're minimizing what was done, but they're simply choosing to let it go from their energetic field that is just constantly bringing it up. And they really feel like that other person must have been in darkness to do something like that. and they hope that that person sees the light. Because that's how I always feel about people who do bad things, is that the most important thing to me is that they understand why what they did was so wrong. Punishment doesn't really accomplish that. But there are very enlightened Scorpios that I think can understand motivations, because Scorpio rules the eighth house, and the eighth house is the shadow, the taboo, the seedy underbelly of life. I mentioned in another video that there's a YouTube channel. I think it's called White Underbelly. I don't know. I'm sure some people who are born under the sign of Scorpio know exactly what I'm talking about, where the person who's the interviewer talks to all kinds of people. Usually they're people who are addicts or prostitutes, things like that, and goes into their background. And you can see over and over and over again people who have been abused, neglected. They might have had parents with addictions themselves, and that breeds neglect, for instance, and abuse. And so it's no wonder that they grew up to do the things that they did. And it's just a fascinating channel for the different people that they have interviewed. And so a Scorpio person that's at a higher vibration understands this, but the problem is that you can intellectually understand something, but if you are in a place that you don't understand that even if a person is like, you feel sorry for someone, and you end up becoming romantically involved with them, that it might be more pity than love, because this is something that Pisces tends to fall prey to, is falling in love with the wrong person. Scorpio sometimes, but not, to me, it's more often a Pisces person who does so and lives to regret it, because sometimes they can get themselves in a world of trouble by being involved with somebody who is, very dysfunctional. This combination can be really great for any artist, because the double water, it reminds me of the Queen of Cups or something, where the person is highly psychic for sure. So any kind of healing arts profession, but also artistic, in terms of creativity, an actor, actress, a dancer, anyone who, maybe a musician, anybody who can create beautiful illusions. Now, a psychologist, would this be a good combination for a psychologist? Yes, if the person has healed enough of their trauma, because again, this person may have been through a lot in their life, and it's very important when you're working in the healing arts that you're doing something that is going to tune into that other person, but you're not so biased or subjective that you are really, when you're talking to that individual, and in the case of a therapist, for instance, you might be giving them advice, or your insights into their behavior, that you're not projecting your own stuff onto them, because that's something that can happen when people still have the shadow self to contend with. In terms of love, this combination, I always say with Scorpio, because if your sun is in Scorpio, you might have Venus and or Mars in Scorpio as well. The moon can be in any sign, but there could be some kind of trust issues involved, because you may have been hurt by others in the past, and it's hard to get close to a special someone. However, you may want to have that type of relationship more than anything in the world. You might want to have like a very intense connection with someone, but you kind of shy away from it because you're afraid of being vulnerable. Scorpio is a sign that can view vulnerability as a liability. Now, because Pisces is at the ascendant, this may be modified, or it could be like really fought against and kind of that there's overcompensation for it by being a hard ass type of person. So definitely look at how you interact in intimate relationships. If you tend to kind of hold back and keep your feelings private, all the water signs, but Scorpio in particular is notorious for this, are known for being very secretive with their emotions. And I think the reason why is they feel so vulnerable, they do the exact opposite, like I was implying. And yeah, so that could be happening. What else? What else? Well, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Well, one thing that is related to relationships and how the Pisces rising connects with it is that there might be even a little bit of a manipulation where you present yourself as this poor victim, meaning that you're looking for somebody to rescue you. And this is something I see changing as you mature, as you realize that you don't want to really attract attention with your problems. The extreme example of that is the covert narcissist who maybe they did come from a background of abuse, but they've identified with that abuse and they see themselves as a victim and they characterize themselves that way so much that they don't really want to heal, because then they wouldn't have that sense of, being pitied or being people giving them attention because they're suffering. Because yes, it is an attention getter to have some kind of problem that, when that's a ploy that is used sometimes. It's a kind of a manipulation, because sometimes people will treat another person like they're the only ones that they can trust. They're the only one who is able to solve this problem or help them in a particular way. And the other party may feel flattered that they are, have this special place in that individual's heart, but it could be because they're trying to manipulate that person into giving them attention because they're in this bad place. They're in this negative space. And really, all that does is it encourages more and more of that self-identified victimhood. And I think, Scorpio is not really about that. So I don't really think that this is going to be too much of a problem. But I was just looking at it from the standpoint of the worst case scenario, and also just for anybody, what they might do when they're not really thinking, that they're just running on automatic. Sometimes I think that's one of the reasons why people have these types of behaviors in the first place. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.